Show me life, show me love. Make a change, time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me life, show me love. Show me life, show me love. Make a change, time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love, show me love. This is all we got. Show me love. This is all we got. Show me love. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Sometimes life will push you down, make you fall onto the ground. But I know you will turn it around. Oh, this is all we got. And I know you'll make mistakes, get interference and lose your way. Find the light when it rains. Oh, this is all we got. Show me life, show me love. Make a change, time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me life, show me love. Show me life, show me love. Make a change, time is up. We can wait for better days, but the days won't come. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got. 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 Show me love. Show me life, show me love. This is all we got.
Got a psycho trapped within, can't contain her, crawling underneath my skin. She's got humor, she's just one of a kind, out of mind. She's a rebel, always on the move. She's an outlaw, she's a bimbo and an info. Is she human? She's just one of a kind, out of her mind. Yeah. One too many times I wake up bruised. Oh, how she wears me down. She fucks with everyone, no matter what I try to lose. Now she had to take a risk, but I fucking love that bitch. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go, no. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go, no. When I wake up in a funky mood, first instinct is to binge drink till I can't think. Life is pretty when you're out of your mind and fucked up inside. Oh, one too many times I wake up bruised. Now she had to take a risk, but I fucking love that bitch. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go, no. She's a part of me, I don't wanna let go. She's a part have the time of your life every single night. The confetti's raining down. You put your hands to the sky, center of the crowd. You're the talk of the town. And I tell myself I don't want that. What glitters isn't gold. I tell myself I don't need it, 'cause I'm fine on my own. But I hate being on the outside looking through a window. I say I don't want it, but I'm so full of it. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna dance with somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna hold on to somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. Living your life through a lens, perfect pretending. You think no one can tell, but everything's just fake. Now you're becoming the person you once hated. You also used to say that. I tell myself I don't want that. What glitters isn't gold. I tell myself I don't need it, 'cause I'm fine on my own. But I hate being on the outside looking through a window. I say I don't want it, but I'm so full of it. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna dance with somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna hold on to somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. Life of the party. Life of the party. Life of the party. Life of the party. Life of the party, life of the party, life of the party, life of the party. Yeah, I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna dance with somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna hold on to somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. Be cool. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna dance with somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh. Be cool. I wanna be the life of the party. I wanna hold on to somebody. Be ooh, 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 ooh.
I can feel my body cold against the concrete, but I can't seem to get enough. My mind is fixed on what it wants. I just let you beat me. Looks can be deceiving. Let you get the best of me. In bed with my worst enemy. This is a no-go. I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone. Back up and get me home. This is a no-go. I just can't take hold. This is a danger zone. Back up and get me. So put your hand in mine. Follow me. Let me waste your time. Set up, do some stupid shit. Take a seat. Let me waste your time. So put your
Yo, welcome to Alpha Omega University. Welcome back, everyone. We got another episode today. We have episode 29, Reading the Enemy. All right, this is actually I would consider the thing I have the most experience and expertise with. If there is anything that I would say that that I'm basically either the top or in the top like 3 players in the entire game in regards of something, if I were to like, pat myself in the back for something, it would be exactly this, reading the enemy, right? So I have a ton of experience with scouting and all of that, and also calling, right? So those two tend to take into account reactions to the enemy and what the enemy is going to do. And so I've had a lot of people that have told me, to make this episode specifically about like the things that I know about what to do, about how to read the enemy, to understand what they're gonna do before they even do it, before they even think about doing it. Very oftentimes, I will know exactly what their next move before they even know that they're gonna do that. And I'm gonna be able to explain all of that today. Give you guys basically my my toolbox, right? My toolbox. So a lot of these things are going to be really hard. All right, there are a lot of really complicated concepts that it's easy to just say, right? But it's very hard to apply while you're actually in the middle of a ZvZ. The enemy's engaging, and all these things are happening at the same time. And to be able to kind of keep your head level is the primary issue. But if you're able to do that, then applying these things that we're going to learn today, the reading the enemy, is gonna be really good. But before we get into that, you guys see here the thing I got pulled up is the patch notes, right? So there's a couple things I want to go through real quick before we get into the episode. But before we get into all of that, I just want to make sure to announce that I forget sometimes, but subscribe, follow, like, drop a comment, whatever, especially if you're on YouTube. Comments and likes, I really appreciate it. On Twitch, obviously, go ahead and drop a follow or subscribe if you want to. You don't have to, obviously. But yeah, so anyway, the content is free. It's gonna stay free, and I'm gonna keep doing this for you guys. But obviously, I appreciate it. If you guys subscribe, it helps me out a lot. All right, so we're gonna go over two things before we get into the episode today. Oh, and by the way, I am reading the chat. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns at any point in time, whether it has to do with what we're talking about or not, it doesn't matter, right? I will answer all your questions, whatever you have. Drop it in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. I will respond. It usually takes me about a day or so to respond. So, but I will definitely be responding to you guys there as well. All right. Two things we're gonna go over. We're gonna go over the patch notes, right? Which is what I already have pulled up. No worry, I'm gonna zoom it in a little in a second, just to make sure that you guys are able to see it better. But then after that, we're gonna actually go into this here, which is we're gonna actually watch together the video that Albion just posted. It's the shapeshifter weapons video. All right, I already watched it, but we're gonna watch it together, just in case you haven't watched it, you missed it, whatever. Right, and then I'm gonna comment on it, right? So you can kind of take this as like a reaction video type thing, right? I'm gonna give you guys my thoughts on it, because I also have a little bit more information than the video gave, right? I some time ago there was a leak. There was a leak on the data files on the coding data files for the Albion Online API, right? And or I don't know if it was through the API. I don't know. Anyway, there was a leak. And I was able to read some of it because I did take some computer science classes at some point when I was going in school. So I understand a little bit of coding, not a lot, right? Some smarter people were able to dissect a lot more than me, but I was able to read some of it. And so I found some of the other things about those new weapons. It's OV says all leaks come from game files. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know exactly how, I just know a little bit. Like I said, I don't know too much. Yeah, usually test server files. Okay, I'll take your word on it. I don't know, but so we saw those a few weeks ago, and so I'll give you guys my comments on those things and what I think it matters. The show is for ZvZ, right? The show is not about just Albion Online. It's about Albion Online ZvZ aspect, right? So essentially what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to give you guys my perspective on what those weapons are going to mean for ZvZ, including the little bit of data that I understand from the game files, right? As it's OV saying on the chat there. And so I'll let you guys know what I think on these shapeshifter weapons in general, right? I obviously don't know the specifics of every single one of those weapons. I don't know every detail, but generally speaking, what I saw plus what I'm seeing from this new video that just came out, how it might impact ZvZ play, right? There are some really key pieces of information in that video. This is why usually I'll just talk about it, right? You guys know that's how I usually do it. I just talk about it. But I think there are some really important things that we need to really focus on that video that explain a lot more than we might actually notice if we just kind of just watch it for fun, right? So, all right. Anyway, first things first, the patch notes, right? So we're looking at the patch notes. Let me zoom in here for you guys, making sure you guys can see it. Let me make sure this is good. Yeah, all right, you guys should be able to read that. All right. So this patch notes dropped July 5th, right? So this was 2-3 days ago, depending on where you are, right? And I'm gonna skip through the top part. Generally speaking, there's always little changes here and there. Some of them are important. Most of the time, not really. I mean, they're fixes and stuff that make the game better. Obviously, we like them, but they're not huge critical components for ZvZ. So we're gonna change all the way down to the combat balance changes. Right, this is the section that will have usually the stuff that we really want to know, the stuff we're really interested in, especially for ZvZ, right? But even if you're playing like even 5v5s or 20v20s, like this stuff is what you really want to know. All right, so changes here real quick. If you guys want to read it, go ahead and look it up. The address bar is up here. You guys can copy that or type it in one by one, right, if you want. Or what I usually do is to get to this section, some people don't know, go to Google and then you literally type in Albion Online patch list, right? And you type that. It should be the first one on the top. It is, at least for me. You click on that and it's gonna be, it's gonna send you to the forums and where they post their stuff. So you can get there. You can read all this stuff. I'm not gonna read all of it because it'll take forever and that's kind of boring, right? So we're just gonna go through it real quick. Arcane Orb. So these are, by the way, these are patch notes that have actually like gone through, right? Like this is like actually live now, right? This is not the NDA. Okay, this is not the test server, nothing like that. This is actually live. Okay, so Arcane Orb, right? This is the one-handed arcane. The purge now triggers before the silence. That is extremely important. In my opinion, it should have been done forever, right? But it has never really been a big deal until now. And the reason it is now is because of the phase scale hat, right? So specifically the phase scale hat, if you don't know, real quick, the phase scale hat makes you uninterruptible, right? Your cast becomes uninterruptible. And so what happens is that if you're uninterruptible with the phase scale hat and you go and drop a one-handed arcane on people, it used to be the silence first and then the purge. So then you would silence the opponent, but it wouldn't actually work because they had a phase scale hat. So they would still continue channeling even though you silence them, and then it would purge. And so what would happen is that the phase scale hat would be purged, right? But the channel would still be going. Like if you're shooting a siege bow or a brimstone or damnation, whatever your channel is, right? So what would happen is it would keep on channeling because you silenced first, but that was negated by the phase scale hat, and then you purged the phase scale hat, which was great, but the channel kept going. You needed another CC in order to actually stop that, right? So a lot of people got big use out of the phase scale siege bow bomb squads. This was pretty killer, to be honest. And then also another one was also the Mistwalker hood bomb squads, right? They'd pop the Mistwalker hood and they just keep shooting, right? As long as they don't get it interrupted, they won't die. But now you actually can make them die with the purge. Although you could before too, I guess. That's what it was. I was missing one piece. What people would run sometimes would be like Graveguard boots and things like that, right? To make you uninterruptible and from certain CCs, right? And so now you would actually be able to purge and now silence. So basically, one-handed arcane. And by the way, they did this change. I'll show it later. It's down here. Battle Howl, Heavy Mace, right? They did the same exact thing to Heavy Mace as well, right? So everything I'm explaining is not just for one-handed arcane, but it's also for Heavy Mace. And so essentially now the purge happens and then the silence. So what it means is that it's a guaranteed silence no matter what, right? Like that's the point. It's an absolute guaranteed silence regardless of anything that the player is having. I mean, there might be an issue, like I don't know. I can't think of anything, to be honest. Unless it's like if you're running like a demon armor, you can't do it because the demon armor is uninterruptible in and of itself, right? So you can't actually purge that because it's a chat anyway. So there are a couple things like that, but in general, yeah, I mean, it's a guaranteed silence. So that's obviously a great change. This here is actually a change. The next change is the locust change. It's actually a change I wanted to talk about a little bit more because they had fixed it, right? Quote unquote fixed it, right? They fixed the locust where they made it, the cleanse logic rework was basically like, instead of cleansing every, 0.25 seconds or whatever it was, right? I can't remember at this point, but It was a very, very short interval, right? It was like, I don't know. If anybody knows in the chat, go ahead and drop it. But I want to say it was like a little less than like 0.25 seconds, right? Like it was pretty fucking quick, the tick. And so Itobi says they messed it up at first and spike damage didn't apply. I don't know if they fixed it. Yeah, exactly. So that's what happened, right? So spiked gauntlets, Spirit Hunter, what was it? There was another one. Wailing bow also. All those weapons didn't do any damage while you were inside a locust, right? So if you got hit by any of those and you were inside a locust, they weren't doing any damage. The reason is that the logic rework for the locust made it so that, I guess somewhere in their coding, and this is why I want to talk about it a little bit more, is because somewhere in their coding, they basically made it so that it's a continuous effect, right? Whereas before, they had never had that, right? And if you actually look at the entirety of the entire game, there is nothing in the game that is actually a continuous thing other than like quote unquote ground effects, right? But I guess those are worked differently into the game. I'm not sure, to be honest. But I guess they're worked differently into the game somehow. And basically, what it did is that the locust was actually doing doing cleanses on a tick, right? So that's what it is. It's a fixed tick interval, right? And then what they did with the change was to make it actually cleanse nonstop, okay? Which it seemed great and everything. But here's one of the things that I think what this actually matters is, okay, first of all, they're reverting it, right? That's all you need to know. They're reverting it. So locust is going to be like it used to be. And that's it. What it tells me is that SBI didn't know how to fix this, at least not in the short term. Okay. That's what this tells me, is that they couldn't fix this in the short term. All right. Why does that matter? Because there is something about focus fire protection. Okay. And how quickly you are able to hit an enemy. All right. Those things, if you actually hit, there's a time window, okay, that is considered at the same time. And if you look at weapons in Albion, there's a lot of weapons that say at the same time or whatever, things like that, right? Like damage specifically. Then what it does is that it actually negates the effect of quote unquote at the same time, because it's counting it all as one. So in that little window, let's say it's 0.1 seconds. Okay, let's say it's 0.1 seconds. So if you get hit by 10 different players in that 0.1 seconds, the game will only register it as your focus fire protection as you only got hit by one person, right? Now, I have not tested this because this is like extremely hard to test. Okay. But it would account for a lot of what we see with the clump and dump mechanics where a lot of the players, just kind of disappear before you're able to drop anything on them. And it's like, wait, but like, why didn't focus fire protection help me against the other guys? Like in reality, what focus fire protection should be is that you get hit by the first guy, that's 100% damage. You get hit by the second guy, that's like, 75% damage. The third guy, 50% damage. The fourth guy, 25% damage, right? But what we're actually seeing is that tons of people hit at the exact same time and they all deal a big amount of damage, right? And so what happens, I think, right? Again, I haven't tested this. You guys can go out and test this. What I think is that for some reason SBI can't work like the cleanse logic rework, right? They can't work outside of fixed tick intervals, right? It might be something in their coding or whatever. And so what I think is that it has more to do, like it gives us information about how focus fire protection actually works, and it makes us realize that this is exactly why certain weapons are just much, much better on the field than others, such as like brimstones, right? Like brimstones have a delay on the E drop, right? And that means that they are consequently always going to drop just a little bit after every other weapon, right? So maybe in that interval, you actually, like in that 0.1 second interval, maybe you get hit 10 times. And after that 0.1 second interval, you get the 10-person focus fire protection. It could be like that, right? But no matter what, those 10 people that hit you within that interval, they hit you as if there was zero focus fire protection, right? And I don't remember where it was, but somewhere in the wiki, right? If you guys look in the wiki, it actually says that the focus fire protection is triggered at an interval, right? And so I think they've made this clear from the very beginning, but it hasn't necessarily been shown in things like this, like where they actually try to work away from fixed tick interval, and it didn't work, so they came back to the normal, which is their fixed tick interval, right? So I think this is they're acknowledging that this is not something that they like, but at the same time, it's not something they can fix, at least not right now, right? So that's something important to look at for weapons and stuff like that. Anyway, I know that's a lot more high level, thinking than what we mostly just do is just like just hit at the same time and that's fine. But I think it answers some of the questions as to why some players deal less damage than others, even if they're wearing the same gear and everything like that, right? So anyway, other changes, an enchanted quiver bow attack damage increase, not a big deal. That's the one-handed bow. War bow doesn't matter. Explosive bolt crossbows, the stand time went down. That's pretty good, I guess. The projectile speed went up. It's pretty good, I guess. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it doesn't matter because you shouldn't be running explosive bolt, right? Like, and I know there's a lot of people are like, oh my god, explosive bolt is good. What are you talking about? No, it's not. It's not good. Don't run explosive bolt. It's not that it's bad. It's not bad. Okay, I should say that it's not bad. The problem with explosive bolt is that the other one is better. Auto fire on the Q for crossbows is much better. Okay, so you should just be running that. Period. Explosive bolt, whatever. This is actually a big change. Siege bow. All right. They're changing it so that so instead of doing max health percent damage, it's actually doing current health percent damage. This is gonna this change on its own is going to basically make it so that you can't run siege bow bomb squads only. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think Siege Bow is very, very powerful. Okay, it's still going to be very strong because Siege Bow does damage in two ways. It does percent damage, and that's what they were talking about here. But it also does base damage, right? Like a regular weapon, regular damage, right? So, basically, Siege Bow is still going to be very strong, very powerful. In fact, I told you guys many months ago, Siege Bow's OP, right? And you guys have seen it now. It's proven. I think everybody can agree it's OP. This change is gonna bring it back down to a little bit more normal, right? We're gonna have to see how much it actually affects. I'm not sure about it, right? It could be a big change or it could be, a slight little debuff. We'll see. But no matter what, I think it's still gonna be very strong. But this is gonna, I think, make it so that bomb squads can't run only Siege Bow. You're gonna have to mix it up now. You're gonna have to run things like permafrost with the bomb squad. I don't know, just other kinds of weapon. Brimstones, I guess. If you're gonna go with but brimstone and siege bows don't mix very well in my experience. But anyway, at least not for bomb squads. For main Zerg, absolutely not for bomb squads. So anyway, that's beside the point. So yes, a little debuff, right? Basically a nerf, I should say. Maces, heavy mace, cooldown 15 to 18 seconds, 3 seconds more. To be honest, I've said this for a long time. I've played heavy mace for a very, very, very long time. And to be honest, 15 seconds was OP. Absolutely. It's just completely and totally OP. Hands down. Right? 18 seconds, it's still OP, to be honest. And the purge now triggers before the silence, so that, that's the change we already talked about. We won't go into it. But 15 to 18 seconds, that's 3 more seconds cooldown. Yeah, it'll make a change. You'll feel it. But it's not a big deal, honestly. Heavy mace is still strong, right? Period. Iron Will, swords, energy cost, parry strike, cooldown, not a big deal, honestly. Some people were getting excited about Black Monk Staff. Don't get excited. It's not a big deal. Black Monk Staff breaks any shield every time it deals damage. Basically, the thing is like, okay, well, if you're going to run Black Monk Staff to counter shields, which basically means to counter enigmatic, then why the hell are you not running Life Curse? Like it's Ovi said Life Curse earlier, right? He was talking about something else, but essentially, why wouldn't you run Life Curse, right? Like Life Curse would just do a better job than Black Monk Staff at exactly this, right? So, not super important. Spears, Impaler, not a big deal. I do like Impaler, but it needs a big buff in damage in order for it to be viable for ZvZ, and it needs to have a less hit, like basically no hit delay. The stand time is criminal, to be honest. Like, there's just so many things wrong with Impaler for the spear. Spear throw, Heron spear. They adjusted the projectile hitbox, making it less likely to hit close targets behind the caster. That's nice. That's great. I think Heron spear is strong. Okay, I think it's completely underused. I mean, it's basically not used at all, right, in ZvZ. But I think it does have a place in ZvZ. It is a strong weapon, and this, I guess, helps, but it's not a big deal. Soldier armor block doesn't matter. Judy Helm fixed the bug where it triggered higher diminishing returns than intended. That's nice. I don't think we're gonna see much of a difference, though. To be honest, I don't think most people noticed this higher than intended diminishing returns. But it's nice. I'm glad they fixed it, I guess, if there was an issue there. Everything else doesn't really matter. Crush Charge, Dustweaver Boots. I know some people have been using it for ZvZ. They're not very reliable, to be honest, for ZvZ. But, you know, some people like them, and they're increasing them for 5 seconds. So, I mean, not a big deal. Like, if you like Dustweaver Boots for ZvZ, 5 seconds more is not a big deal. All right. That's basically it. I feel like we took a little longer than I wanted to with this, but I wanted to talk to you guys about the changes specifically with the interval stuff, right? So that was kind of enlightening in a way. Let's get into the next thing. We're gonna get into this video. I'm just gonna play the video and then we'll talk about it after. All right.
Hello and welcome to another Albion Online Dev Talk. Many of you have been eagerly awaiting news about what's coming next for Albion Online. Well, the time has finally come to start answering that question. In the coming weeks, we will be releasing a series of dev talks, each one focusing on one of the features we're currently working on and how they fit into our long-term plans for Albion Online. Today, we're thrilled to introduce the Shapeshifter Staffs, Albion's next major weapon line. The You Are What You Wear system is a cornerstone of Albion Online, and one of our goals is to continually expand the system by introducing exciting new items that can be incorporated into your builds. In fact, adding new items can have such a significant impact on the game's meta that it can feel like the entire game changes with each edition. For this reason, we want to make sure every item we release brings something new and exciting to the game, and the Shapeshifter Staffs certainly do that. For the first time in Albion Online, players will be able to transform into entirely different beings, called shapes. This ability offers players equipped with a Shapeshifter Staff an entirely new level of versatility, as they can switch back and forth between their human and their weapon shape, which significantly affects their capabilities. In their human form, shapeshifters are masters of manipulating raw energy, which they can use to inflict damage, disrupt enemies, or support their allies. Whilst doing so, they build up shift charges, which are necessary to shift into their weapon's associated shape. Each weapon comes with a unique shape, and each shape possesses its own set of unique abilities. These abilities can be enhanced using previously collected shift charges. In this way, shapeshifters are encouraged to continuously switch between their forms to maximize their potential on the battlefield. As each shape also comes with unique health and armor stats which replace your human stats, players can use this for switching roles during a fight. Some shapes are very resilient, while others are more deadly but fragile. This system allows for a vast array of build possibilities. Players can double down on their shape's strength by equipping matching gear for their human form, or they can choose to go in the opposite direction and pick opposing armor to their weapon's shape, allowing them to switch from damage dealer to tank and vice versa. You can look forward to the shapeshifter weapons arriving in Albion's next major content update. And beyond that, expanding and improving the You Are What You Wear system is always a priority on our roadmap. In our next Dev Talk, we will explore an all-new open-world activity that complements the shapeshifter weapons. This activity will also introduce additional equipment choices and further enhance the range of options available for designing your builds. We look forward to seeing you there.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack here, and if you haven't seen the video, I mean, you just got the first watch of the video, then you're probably like excited, you're hyped up, right? It's great. I mean, I'm excited. I think these weapons are gonna be different, right? So this is my take on it, right? I think they're trying to make these weapons very different. It's like absolutely give a different feel to the entire game when you play these weapons. Like that, they really are trying to focus on a different, just something that feels completely different than your normal, like, all right, you know, you got your gear, whatever, and this is, you know, what you're gonna play with, okay? They're trying to make it where you're actually extremely versatile, right? And one of the things that you know, they mentioned there is that basically your shapeshift form, right? Your shapeshift form is going to be here, let me actually put up the we can actually start watching these now. Yeah, these are the videos like usual. These are the videos from last week, right? So yeah, it's OV says, if I'm not wrong, checking the old game data right now, Locust used to trigger once per tick, and one tick is 0.5 seconds. So it used to trigger. Yeah, I think it was a lot slower, but they've you can probably check like patch notes at some point. They actually made it faster. I just don't remember what that faster tick was, and I want to say it was like 0.25 seconds, if not 0.1 seconds. But yeah, basically they've had this issue with ticks for a very long time, man. Like it's a very interesting thing, right? But again, it's, you know, it's hypothetical, right? Like I haven't tested these things, especially with like focus fire protection, but it would make a lot of fucking sense, right? Anyway, so the new weapons, right? The new weapons. I'm excited. I think they're gonna be cool. However, I'm a little bit wary, okay? Because what they're doing is they're adding these weapons where, if you listen to the video, right? They said Robin was like, yeah, so these weapons, when you shape shift, they have their own armor and damage, their own armor and damage stats, right? They have their own stats, right? Which means that your gear does not matter when you're shape shifted. Now, I assume that, the higher tier gear you have, the higher the stats of that particular shapeshift is, right? But your actual gear specifically does not matter. What I mean by that, okay, let me give you an example, right? Let's say you wear everything flat 6, okay? Just everything flat 6. And you're wearing complete cloth, like everything's cloth, completely flat 6, and you're wearing I don't know, there was a bear, right? There was a golem, the golem, right? The golem staff, whatever it's called, right? And you're wearing complete cloth, and you're wearing, flat 6, right? Well, when you go into your shapeshift form, the system probably calculates like, okay, you're wearing flat 6 average, right? So then I'm gonna give you stats that are, flat 6 average. Or maybe it only takes the account of the weapon, right? Maybe it only looks at your weapon's IP, right? So those things are very important to look at, and I really would love to know like how exactly they're gonna calculate, quote unquote, your own stats, okay? Your built-in stats from that, because they're basically throwing away your gear while you're in that shapeshift form, right? Which is cool. And also, what he said is basically, if you're running all cloth and then you go with the golem, which I know from the coding, the golem is actually like a tank type, right? And so what it means is that basically you're gonna be DPS because you're full cloth, right? As a human form. But then when you God damn, I can't say that. When you change into the golem, right? You're actually going to be now a tank with tank stats as if you're wearing plate, Okay, when you shift back into human form, you're gonna go back into basically the stats that you have from your gear, which is cloth. Okay, that is extremely crazy in my opinion. Okay, not only that, another thing I want you guys to understand is that when you shape shift with these weapons, your Q and your W become different. I think your E basically brings you back to human form, right? I think that's what it is. I can't remember 100%, but I'm 99% sure that the E is going to bring you back to human form. And when you're in human form, the E is going to bring you into the shapeshift, right? So what's going to change is that you're going to have a Q and a W that you're able to use. Now, I don't know, because they said, you know, they're talking about like how your stats and all that don't have anything to do with your gear. Okay. And this is where it's going to get really crazy. I'll tell you guys the truth. This is where it gets really out there, right? Is because what I'm thinking is, okay, am I going to have access to my abilities from my boots, from my chest, and from my helmet, right? Because if I do have access to those, then holy shit. Because think about this. You can actually start running basically things that are meant to be for like cloth players, but you're gonna have it on a character that has plate stats, right? So what I'm talking about is like, think about like the cleric robe and things like that. As we saw from the video, we don't. Did they show that? I probably have to pull it up again. I don't want to pull it up again. We don't have any armor spells? Okay, all right. Well, okay, then that dismisses that, right? Because that would have been a little too much, man. I'm glad you pointed it out, because that would have been kind of it kind of would have broken the game, to be honest, and like everything that every build that we know of would basically go out the fucking window, right? However, right, you can still basically play two roles at the same time, right? You can play tank, but you can also play, you know, DPS, right? Just like as Robin said, is you can switch up between them if you have full cloth, but you're wearing like the golem. You have the golem weapon, or you know, other ones, right? Like Ovi says, the eagle looks strong. Yeah, I mean, it could be that they're very strong. But that's one of the things that I'm actually a little bit, this is why I don't want to get too excited, okay? Because when I read the coding from all the weapons that they had in the coding that they released, right? Like, granted, all that was very like rudimentary, right? Like there was a lot of stats that were missing. There was a lot of placeholder things. There wasn't all the data there, okay? It was just like, you know, bits and pieces, okay? But from what I was able to see, from what I was able to gather, is that the Q and W skills in shapeshift form are not very strong, okay? There are some that are pretty interesting. Like, I think it was the golem has a W skill that basically is an air compress that continues going, right? It's like a continuous air compress, and every like 0.5 seconds, it pulls people into him, right? And it also does a slow. Now, the thing is that is super cool, right? It's amazing. It sounds fucking incredible. Until you realize that when I read the coding, it said it was like 3 meter radius, right? And it's like, oh, what the hell? Like 3 meter radius ain't shit, right? Like it's nothing, right? Or maybe it was 4 meters. Either way, it's nothing. It's like that, like it's so minimal, right? But I can see a use for it, right? I can see a use for it. But there are other ones that are other Qs and Ws that I read that were just simply like, yeah, that's pointless, right? Like they're like just absolutely useless Qs and Ws, right? And for the most part, I didn't see a lot of Qs and Ws that really like sparked, you know, that kind of gave me the idea that like, damn, like they're like this might actually be like really strong, right? Other than that one that I just mentioned. But again, the area was so small. Now, granted, it could have just been like a testing phase, right? Hopefully. And maybe they tested it and realized that like, yeah, 3 meters radius was, you know, basically useless. Yeah, basically like a jugger. Yeah, just, I mean, I don't think it had purge though. It didn't have purge. But yeah, so stuff like that. Oh, and you actually make a good point. It's Ovi. I'm not sure what it does to buffs applied before changing, like Royal Sandals. That's a huge point, bro. That's a really good point. Yeah, because yeah, what if you have like a Royal Hood stacked and Royal Sandals stacked, right? Do you get to keep those buffs while you shapeshift? Like what? Like all those questions are really important to understand the impact these weapons are going to have into the ZvZ meta, right? I do think that they are going to impact the meta, even though the Qs and Ws don't seem very powerful. I think that there's going to be a couple of the weapons that are actually going to be viable, right? Just like I said, like with the Golem, right? Like it might actually be super viable. Like I can think, even if you have like a 4-meter radius, right? I can think of a situation where, you know, you go and get the clump and then suddenly you use that W on top of the clump to keep that clump clumped up for even longer, right? Because it's a continuous tick. So that could be very, very useful, okay? And it can allow for different weapons like Brimstone, right? Like Brimstone has the delayed drop, so that's why a lot of people don't play it. But what if you can keep that clumped up for a little longer, then suddenly Brimstone becomes more viable again, okay? Those kinds of things, I think they, at the minimum, it's interesting, right? And we won't know until they're actually out and we can actually play them. So you know, for now, everything is all speculation. But I do think there's gonna be a couple weapons that could be useful. I think the Golem is going to be one of the useful ones. The other one that I think might be useful is gonna be the Wolf, right? The Wolf that like swipes. So when I read it, it was basically a swipe, and that swipe was pretty much as big as the Demon Fang. Okay, the only problem that it had with that swipe damage was that the damage was kind of low, right? But again, I mean, it's a placeholder, right? So if they made the damage higher, then you know, it could be great. You know, it could be really good. So anyway, that's it for those weapons. I think there's a lot of possibilities. I think there's a lot of really good things that can come out of them. But there's also a lot of things that just I don't know. They didn't seem like polished weapons, but that obviously makes sense because they weren't polished weapons, right? This was a leak before they were ready. So and they probably are still working on these things right now, right? So we'll see when it actually comes down to. We'll see what they actually look like. All right. We took a long time with that with those two things today, but we're gonna get into the episode now, the actual episode, right? 40 minutes into the stream, episode 29, reading the enemy. I'm gonna try to go a little bit faster than I intended to, but either way, you guys are gonna get all the information. I promise. I just won't go too deep into some of the things. And if you guys have questions, drop them in the chat. I'll definitely answer. I'll answer anything you guys got. So, to start off, we're going to be talking about what actually is reading the enemy, right? Like what do I mean by reading the enemy? And then we're going to talk about the basics of what reading the enemy is. Then we're going to have 3 levels, all right? We're going to start off with the apprentice, right? So that's going to be like the lowest level, like you know, things that somebody that's just brand new to reading the enemy is doing, right? Then the veteran, and that's where, like, you know, the mid-tier, kind of like somebody who has experience with reading the enemy, and they're, you know, and they're looking at these other things. And then we're gonna basically finish off with the master, and that's gonna be like the super high level stuff that, you know, like the highest level players are able to actually see from the enemy, that can tell them, you know, how to read the enemy. So at the very end, we're gonna put it together. And then we're going to talk about what the worst possible outcome could be. And I'll talk about that initially right now in a little bit. But essentially, what do you do in a worst possible outcome in that scenario, right? So that's where we'll finish it up. The ending is going to be pretty quick. We're mostly going to spend the time today talking about the ways, the different tools that we have to read the enemy and to understand what they're going to do. All right. So what actually is reading the enemy, right? Essentially, it's prediction, right? You're trying to predict what the enemy is about to do, right? It's pretty simple. I mean, you're just trying to understand what the enemy is going to do next, okay? Now, why do we need to read the enemy? Like, why do we care what they're going to do next? Well, obviously, it's because we want to be able to counter them effectively, right? If we know that they're going to engage on our west flank, then we want to get away from that west flank. We don't want to get caught in that clump, right? Or if you're a disengaged tank, then you want to protect the west flank, right? You're a support, you want to start looking at the west flank and, get ready to put your locust down up there, things like that, right? So all those things are obviously why we want to read the enemy, to predict and then to counter whatever they're going to do, right? Very simple. Now, how can we actually read the enemy? And this is what the entire episode's going to be on, is how, right? We don't just look at what the enemy is doing, right? We also look at what the circumstances are on the field, right? So basically what I'm saying is that we don't just want to look at what's actually happening right now and what has happened before, but we also want to look at what is happening around the situation, right? And we'll go into that in a little bit, right? But essentially it has to do with things like the terrain, right? The aggressiveness of your enemy, the passivity of your Zerg, right? How passive your Zerg is playing. The components of your enemy Zerg, right? Like the composition of your enemy Zerg. Things like that. All those things come into play, but we need to kind of dissect them one by one to be able to understand how do we actually read the enemy, right? Now, once we do that, right? Once we dissect and we actually know what the enemy is going to do. Here's the thing. I'll tell you guys the truth. You're never going to know 100% what the enemy is going to do. I mean, if you get really, 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 really good, you can kind of get up there to like 97, 98, 99% sure that they're going to do a certain thing, right? But there are some Zergs that they do really well at masking what they're going to do, right? Like they do really well at just hiding what their next move is going to be. And that's great, right? For them. But essentially what I'm saying is you're never going to have 100% certainty on what the enemy is going to do. Which means what? That you have to operate on a most likely outcome scenario, right? So it basically, what the enemy is going to do is usually what is most likely for him to do, right? Think about this. If you go and have an enemy that, you look at everything and you're like, well, they are, 80% likely, to kite back, right? And they are, 20% likely to engage on me, right? So then what are you going to play on? You're going to not play on the 20%. You're going to play on the 80% because there's a giant difference between 80% and 20%, right? So what you're going to do is like, okay, well, they're going to kite back. 80% sure they're going to kite back. So I'm going to walk into them so that when they kite back, I'm still close to them, right? Whereas if you operate on that 20% and you say, 20% chance they're going to engage me, I'm going to back up. And then you're wrong. You're going to be backing up while your enemy's kiting away from you and building that distance. Now you're screwed because you're out of position, right? This is why it matters, okay? Now, with that being said, we have to think about what the worst possible outcome could be, right? Because that's also important, right? The worst possible outcome may not be the most likely. But if the enemy takes this outcome, then it's gonna have devastating consequences for you, okay? What I mean by this is, let's say you have a 60% chance the enemy's gonna kite back and a 40% chance the enemy's gonna engage you, okay? Well, that's pretty close. I mean, there's 20 points in between, right? 40 and 60, but it's still kind of close, right? 60% chance. That's not like, that's a little bit better than a coin flip, right? So if you're looking at it and you're like, okay, well, they have a 40% chance to engage me and a 60% chance to kite back. Okay, that's great. So what should you do? Well, you should walk towards them, right? However, if you walk towards them, then suddenly it is absolutely certain that if they actually do engage, you're going to die, right? So therefore, you have to weigh the consequences of your actions against the outcomes that they are going to take, right? So in that scenario, you might say, okay, how safe do I want to be, right? I think they're most likely going to kite back, but I don't necessarily want to full push them, because if they don't kite back and they hit me, I put myself in a bad situation and now I'm gonna die, right? So those things are very, very important to understand. Is the worst possible outcome is based upon your response to what the enemy is gonna do. And I'll tell you guys the truth, nobody is ever gonna be perfect, right? Like I said earlier at the beginning of the episode, I said, this is my bread and butter, right? Like, this is what I am best in the game at, right? Like, that's just the truth, okay? And the thing is that I don't get it perfect every time. Shit, I probably don't even get it perfect half the time, right? But the thing about it is that you need to be able to operate on likely scenarios, because you think the enemy is going to engage east, right? And then let's say you think the enemy is going to engage east, and you think the enemy is going to engage east with a 60% chance and a 40% chance to engage west. So as a disengaged tank, where should I position myself? Well, I have to look at, okay, just because they're more likely to engage east does not mean I should go and posture myself east. Because what if they do engage east, but they're hardly going to get a clump because my guys are not clumped there. My guys are not in danger there. My guys are more in danger to the west. And so if they do engage west, they're actually going to get a big hit off. So I rather go and stand at the west and make sure I protect the west side, even though that's less likely to happen. Simply because if it does happen, it would be more devastating to my Zerg. The enemy will get more kills on me. All right. So that's very, very important to understand. Just because we read the enemy does not mean that we automatically know what we should do, right? We need to pick our choices, and sometimes we may just have a bad choice. You know, we may just have two bad choices to pick from, and it is what it is, right? And you have to just be okay with that. All right. Now, with that being said, let's get into, you know, the breakdown, right? We're going to go into the basics right now. Okay. These are the fundamental parts of reading the enemy. Okay. These are probably the things that most people already know. And I'll tell you guys the truth. Most people think that these are the only things you should look for, right? And that's the problem, because this is only the basics. This thing goes even deeper. All right. So number one in the basics. All right. Zerg footwork. All right. That's super simple. You watch the entire enemy Zerg movement, and basically you're just watching them all walking, right? And then suddenly they all start walking in one direction all together. Guess what? That's a call, right? Oh, I messed up the video. Sorry. So that's a call, right? Like, if all the enemies just like walking, you know, in different directions, and then suddenly they all start walking southwest at the same exact time, that is not coincidence, right? Like, that is absolutely not coincidence. That means that the caller said, hey guys, let's walk southwest, right? They all responded at the same exact time. Okay. That is not coincidence. That is just basically, that's almost near impossible for it to happen. Okay. So watching the Zerg footwork, that makes sense, right? Another one is watching individual person's footwork, right? Let's say the enemy has a front line in front of you. Okay. And then suddenly one of their hand of justice players, or one of their one-handed mace players, or their caller, right? They suddenly just start walking a little forward towards you a little bit more than usual, right? Like, their front line is like, you know, let's say like 10 meters in front of you, right? And suddenly one engaged tank walks straight into you, just one by himself. And everybody else is just doing whatever they want, right? Just that's normal. But that one guy walks into you. Guess what? That's probably an engage, right? Like, they're probably looking for an engage. And that one guy that stepped forward is probably their engaged tank. Okay? Again, these are basic, right? The next thing is buffs, right? If you suddenly see your entire enemy's Zerg just filled with knight helmets, or royal hoods, or face scale hats, or they all pop their sprints, right? Suddenly at the same exact time. Guess what? It's a call, right? It may not necessarily be a call to engage, but at the minimum, it's a call of something, right? Like, if they all pop their sprints and go away from you, the call is to run away from you, right? But either way, the fact that you see them popping sprints, coupled with their Zerg footwork, because they're all moving in the same direction, that tells you 100% it was a call, right? Again, these are basic. Posturing is the last one of the basic ones, okay? Posturing. So if the enemy is constantly cutting distance with you, or is the enemy walking away from you, right? So what is the enemy's posture looking like? Like, are they playing aggressively against you? Are they playing passive? Are they backing off? Are they slowing it down? Like, what are they doing, right? And so often, you know, we don't tend to think of posturing, but it matters, right? Because if the enemy is like very, very eager to get into your back line, then they're obviously playing a little more aggressive. And that means that you probably want to play a little more safe, right? Or maybe you want to play a little more, you know, farther back, that kind of stuff, right? So posturing is another one that is very, very basic, okay? Now, the next part is going to be the apprentice, okay? And in the apprentice, we're going to have basically everything that once you start actually reading the enemy, right? These are the things that you're going to start learning right off the bat. Okay, these are the first few things you're going to start learning, right? The basics, everybody knows it. Anybody with any ZvZ experience knows these, right? The apprentice is basically anybody who's trying to learn how to read the enemy. At the very beginning, you're going to notice these, and these are the ones that you got to focus on, right? So if you want to learn how to read the enemy, these are the ones that you got to focus on first, and then move on to the next ones, okay? So first off, it's going to be the cooldown timers, right? You want to take note of the enemy E cooldown, their actual engage cooldowns, right? This is very simple because usually you engage and then they engage and then you engage, and you know, every 15 seconds or so somebody's engaging, right? So you kind of know that, right? And that's okay. However, it gets more complicated when you have multiple enemy flanks, or the enemy has bomb squads, or they split their Zerg into, you know, multiple cooldowns, that kind of stuff. It gets more complicated. But at the very basic level, like at the apprentice level, I should say, right? At the apprentice level, just looking at the enemy's cooldowns on their E's and just understanding their timing, right? That's it. Just understand their timing, okay? Again, it's pretty basic, but these are the things that you got to learn right off the bat first, okay? And then another one for the apprentice is going to be the Zerg spread. So is your enemy kind of clumping at the front, or are they clumping in different areas? Like, do they have like a group of people that's clumped up on the east, and then everybody else is just like nicely spread, right? That group on the east is probably a bomb squad, right? Like if you have a random little clump of people on the far east for no reason, right, and everybody else is just spread normally, that's probably a bomb squad over there, right? Because that's what happens, okay? Or are they like really deeply spread? Like, are there players like super far back, okay? Or are they spread around your Zerg? Like, are they like basically angular spread, right? I talk about angles a lot in this game, right? But angular spread, like you see them to your west, but you also see them to your north of your screen, and you basically have this entire umbrella around you of enemies, okay? They're spread, but they're spread across all angles, okay? That tells you something, right? Like, that tells you, well, if they're spread across all angles, that means that, you know, their flanks are going to be weaker, right? So if they're spread to my north, my east, and my west, sure, I have south angle, but they're wrapping around me, right? Now, if I engage directly west or directly east, then the opposite side will not be able to help them, right? If I engage west, the guys on the east will not be able to heal them or support them or whatever, right? If I engage east, the same thing happens on the west. But if I engage the center, then guess what? The two sides, the east and the west, are able to collapse me, right? So these are things that you got to pay attention to, and they tell you a lot about, you know, what's the enemy thinking here? Like, are they spread around me because they're trying to, you know, box me in and kill me, or are they trying to like just contain me from pushing out in any direction, right? But either way, because you read the situation that they're spread at all angles, that means that you understand now that, well, that means they're going to be weak on the far edges of their Zerg, okay? That makes sense. Now, what if instead they're all in your front, right? Like, let's say you're directly west of you, and they're all clumped up very tightly at the very front. Well, if the enemy's clumped up tightly at the front, it's probably not because they're garbage players. It's probably because they're getting ready to engage you, right? Those things are important, right? If they're all clumped up at the very front, that means they're waiting to kind of, you know, hit you. That's why they're trying to cut distance. They're not spread all the way deep, which makes it also, you know, what we talked about earlier. If the enemy is deep spread, right, like they're spread really far out, you know, you can't even see their back line, right? You can't even see their back line. they're spread that much, then that tells you that they're not looking to aggress you. They're not looking to engage you. They're looking to play far back and defensive, right? So that tells you a little bit more about what they're thinking, okay? Another one for the apprentice is going to be the pace of the fight, right? So the pace of the fight is basically, is the enemy throwing a bunch of Qs and Ws and auto attacks, right? And then they suddenly just stop, right? Like, they're basically pacing the fight. Like, they're engaging and they're dropping Qs and Ws, auto attacks. They're putting a lot of damage on you, just doing a bunch of things to you, and then suddenly they just stop, right? What just happened, right? They don't all just stop Q and W and auto attack at the same time for no reason, right? Usually what'll happen, and I promise you guys, if you guys ever watch your videos back, like, you're gonna notice this. When the enemy's using a lot of Qs, Ws, and auto attacks, and then suddenly stops for a second or two, then the very next thing that's gonna happen is they're gonna engage you, okay? That's literally like gonna happen almost every single time, okay? Why? Because the enemy is going and queuing and Wing and auto attacking you, and then suddenly their caller's like, hey guys, get ready to engage, right? So they stop paying attention to using Qs, Ws, and auto attacks, and they start looking for the clump, okay? And so because they start looking for the clump, they unconsciously stop using Qs and Ws and auto attacks, right? By the way, this is like the majority of players. You might think, oh, the elite players don't do that. Bullshit. They all do. They all do it. How do I know? Because I do it too, right? Everybody does it, right? And so my point is that understanding the pace of the fight is another really, really important factor to understanding whether or not the enemy is about to hit you, right? If they're doing something consistently and suddenly they just randomly stop, like let's say they're walking into you, and suddenly they stop, right? Something changed. Something's about to happen, right? Or if or different, right? If they're kiting back, and then suddenly they stop kiting, right? Guess what? They're probably about to turn on you. Okay. Pace of the fight. Very, very important. Another one is going to be the health bars, right? The health bars of the enemy Zerg, right? It's going to tell you basically how the enemy's feeling, right? If the enemy's health bars are like all halfway, right? Like 50% HP, all of them. That's going to tell you that the enemy is probably feeling very weak, very scared to engage. It might mean that they're not gonna actually want to commit to an engage on you. They're not gonna want to full-blown push you, right? And that's very, very important. And you can say, well, really good players, they don't care about health, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they do. I promise you they do, right? There's so many times that even if you have a really, really high tier Zerg, and they go and they have a like really low HP, and the caller's like, get ready to engage them, and they go in 3, 2, 1. They will not engage as hard as they usually do. The highest disciplined players will do it, but the majority won't. Even if the majority is high level players, just not absolutely elite players, right? Because that is very important. So understanding the enemy's health bars will tell you a lot about them. So if you're one of those players that plays without health bars, right? Like we're watching right now, NGM2's video with Escalation. He has no health bars, but that's no health bars for his Zerg, right? He has the health bars for the enemy. But if you look at the enemy's health bars, right? If you don't play with enemy health bars, you're wrong. You need to play with enemy health bars because it'll give you a lot of information. All right. So the next one for the apprentice is gonna be tanks pre-posturing. Okay. So if you're say like holding a choke, right? You're holding a choke, and then suddenly a few enemy tanks start walking across the choke, and they kind of just spread inside of you, or they kind of hug the walls close to you, right? But essentially, a few tanks just walked towards you, right? Now they might be disengaged tanks, they might be engaged tanks, it doesn't matter, right? But they're not like full blown just running into you. They're just walking into you slowly. Like they're just like kind of like pretending like, you don't see me, I'm just tiptoeing here, like, yeah, you can look the other way, right? Close your eyes, right? Like they're just like pretending like they're not actually pushing you, but in fact, they're fucking walking straight into you, right? That is what I call tank pre-posturing, right? Tanks will pre-posture. They will get close so that they can be able to break chokes, right? Especially on choke fights. tanks will walk across the choke and spread out, and then they'll start doing, roots and small stuns and slows and some soft CC right in your backline, just to kind of basically push you away from that choke a little bit, so that the rest of the Zerg can kind of just crash through, right? Because if you're all holding that choke and you're holding your lines, then it's going to be really hard for the enemy to crash through. So what they're going to do is they're going to send their few tanks over and basically start harassing your back line, so that your back line can back off a little bit. And that breathing room is going to allow the enemy Zerg to crash through, right? So tank pre-posturing is another one, very important, right? And it's very easy to see, right? You see them one by one, you start walking in, and you get to realize what they're going to do. Another one is going to be the objective timer, right? Again, and this is from The Apprentice, right? So not too in-depth, but this is objective timer, right? Like if you're fighting for a castle and the castle pops at 1930 UTC, and it's 1925 UTC, right? The enemy is less likely to full push you at 1925 than they are at like 1927, right? So if the enemy's gonna make a fucking move, they're gonna make it before the timer, right? Or if you're holding a territory and the territory pops at 00 UTC, then suddenly you're like, yeah, they're gonna engage, at 2359, right? They're gonna full push at 2358, 2359. So the closer you get to like the objective time, the more important it is to pay attention to those things and to look at whether or not they're about to engage you. All right, now let's get into the veteran. All right, this is what the veteran players who read the enemies will do. And I'll tell you guys the truth, the majority of callers in the game are at about this level, okay? But they hit this level, but they don't necessarily hit everything, okay? The best callers in the game right now will hit these for sure, but will not hit most of the master section, okay? And that's the next section we're going to get into, all right? But basically, the majority of callers in the game will hit this section, all right? So, the veteran is going to be whether or not when the enemy engages, right? You're looking at whether or not it's a full engage or if it's a bait engage, right? You're actually looking at the individual number of enemies that drop their E on that engage, and you're looking to see whether or not it was a full engage or if it was a bait engage. Especially right now, so many callers are calling on a two front style, right? With their bait engage being the first party engage, and then the rest of the Zerg engages, right? And so basically, they want to assess whether the enemy engaged with their full Zerg or just a small group of their Zerg, right? So that's very, very, very important. And again, this is what I tell you guys. Most callers, even the highest level callers in the game right now, they hit this sometimes, but they don't always hit it, right? Because very often they'll get baited themselves because they're not very good at understanding this piece of the puzzle, right? The next part is going to be for the veteran. It's going to be the terrain, all right? The terrain is going to dictate a lot of what is going to happen in a fight, okay? Basically, you want to think about things like, is the enemy pushing you into a choke, right? Are you pushing them into a choke? Are there rocks? Are there walls around them that's going to limit their mobility, right? And if you want to know more about terrain, I made a whole episode on terrain. Terrain is an extremely important aspect of this game, right? And especially about reading the enemy. And so understanding the terrain the enemy is in will tell you whether or not it is viable for them to do certain things, right? So is it viable for them to full push you when there's a tight choke in between you guys? Well, no, right? Is it viable for them to full push you when there's a giant rock right behind you, right? Yeah, it's viable, because if they push you into that rock, they break your Zerg in two, right? They split your Zerg, right? So those kinds of things are very, very important. Another one is like right now we're watching this video, there's a hill, right? There's a giant hill. And it's like, is it viable to push up that hill? Not so viable, because it's hard to look at their back lines, okay? Those things are important. So terrain, another very important feature of reading the enemy. Another part in the veteran is going to be the defensive's cooldowns, right? So remember, when we were looking at the apprentice, we were looking at the enemy's cooldown E's, right? Like their actual E engages, all of that, right? But the veteran is going to look even deeper at the enemy cooldowns. They're not just going to look at the enemy's E's, but they're also going to be looking at the enemy's defensives, right? Are the enemy's defensives up or not? Just because you engage on the enemy does not mean that their defensives are down, right? Sometimes the enemy is able to absorb your damage without actually using a lot of defensives, okay? That might be because they spread really well, right? Or because, you know, like the couple people that got caught in the front popped, you know, resistance potions and gig potions or whatever. And you know, they didn't waste a lot of the defensives. The rest of the Zerg didn't waste their defensives, right? That kind of stuff, right? So that's very, 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 very important. And it's high level to understand because, again, you have to pay attention to all the spells we're watching, right? You have to pay attention to every single thing that is happening on the field to be able to understand not only did the enemy use their engage and their cooldowns, but also are the enemy's defenses being used? Are they still up? You know, what can I do if the enemy's defenses are down versus what can I do if the enemy defenses are up, right? That is something that the veteran, you know, player that reads the enemy is going to be able to do. And by the way, when I mean by the veteran player, I don't mean like regular veteran player who has played the game. No, I mean veteran at reading the enemy. There are lots of players in this game who have played this game for a very long time, and they have never focused on learning how to read the enemy. They're able to read the enemy pretty well, but they're not actually very good. They're not at this level, because to get to this level, you have to make it a habit to actually focus on learning how to read the enemy. All right. Now, the last one for the veteran is going to be the covert operations. All right. Basically, the covert operations is going to be like their bomb squad is bombing the shit out of you constantly. They're bombing you and they're bombing you and they're bombing you. And then suddenly they just go quiet, right? They no longer are bombing you. Suddenly they just stop bombing you, right? It's like, whoa, hold on. We were getting bombed by a siege bomb squad every like 20, 25, 30 seconds. And now suddenly we haven't had a siege bomb squad hit us in a minute, right? It's like, okay, 100%, I can tell you for a fact that bomb squad is coming up your ass, right? They're coming right around behind you, and they're about to flake the shit out of you. Okay, that's what's gonna happen. I promise you, that's what's happening. So what you should do is you should mount up and go find them, right? Go find them. Go look behind. Go look on your flanks. Go look on different areas. Find them, right? And remember, like I said, the terrain, right? If you look, it's like, okay, you have a front line choke, right? And then that means that the enemy can't necessarily just walk around you, but you have a front line choke. Okay, where is the enemy going to be able to go through, right? If they're actually flanking you, if their bomb squad is flanking you, which direction are they flanking you from? Well, look at the map. You're going to see, oh, well, there's another bridge northeast of here. Well, guess what? That fucking bomb squad is going to go through that bridge. So if you mount up and go straight to that bridge, I promise you, you're going to find that fucking bomb squad, right? And that bomb squad's probably about to be dismounting, getting ready to fucking bomb you, right? And so, again, this is how it's important, and this is why it's important, and this is how you're able to assess what the enemy's doing and use it to your advantage, right? You look at these things and you realize, okay, you know, the enemy baited, right? They didn't use a full engage. So therefore, I shouldn't use a full counter engage on them because they have their cooldowns up, right? Or I shouldn't use all my defensives right now because they still have their cooldowns up, right? I'm going to need to use my defenses for the real engage, okay? The terrain is not viable right here, right now for them to engage me, so I don't have to be as worried about them engaging. Like, I'll put it this way, like, we'll watch this fight here, and I'll show you guys some things that I'm watching, right? Look at this, right? So I pause the video right now, and you can see there's a tree up here, a tree and rocks up here in the north, right? There looks to be another, like, I don't know if this is a rock or like a furniture item. I don't know what this is in the south, right? But there's a hideout being constructed in the center, okay? And this guy's Zerg, the perspective we're watching, his Zerg is on the east, the enemy's on the west, okay? And what you're seeing here, it's actually the citizens fighting against chips, I think. And what you're seeing here is, okay, the enemy is looking like they want to engage, right? Look how clumped they are up here in the north, right? And they're actually channeling engages already. This is a damnation being channeled up here, right? And that's great. They're going to engage. But you know what? Should you use all your defenses here? Fuck no. Absolutely not. Hell no. Don't use your defensives. Why? Because your Zerg is kind of spread out a little bit. I mean, I know they're a little clumped over there on the east, but it's not too bad, right? What is going on here, though, is that the enemy is going to have to engage through two little chokes. Look at this, right? This north choke, right? North of this hideout and the rocks, and then south where this rock is and the hideout, right? So therefore, there's only two possible places where the enemy engages. So if you're a disengaged tank, and I think this guy's a disengaged tank. I can't really see his skills right now. I'm pretty sure he's a heavy mace. But if you're a disengaged tank, well, what you want to do is you want to stop this choke here, or you want to stop the north choke, right? And again, this is why reading your enemy is so important, right? Because now you have a decision. Okay, where is the enemy going to engage from? North or south? Well, they're probably going to engage from both. Okay, that's great. Now, which one is going to be more dangerous to me, right? Well, let's look at our Zerg. Our Zerg is up here on the east. Now, I don't know what's over there on the east. Maybe there's a wall or something. If there is, that's kind of dangerous. But if there's not, whatever. But essentially, you want to look at, okay, the enemy's coming from northwest, coming across to the east to engage me. Therefore, the majority of the enemy is going to engage from this north side, right? Now, this north side, see, you can see they're already clumped up, and they're not very clumped at the bottom, right? Now, this north side, they're already clumping up, right? They're going to engage, but guess what? Our north side is actually better spread than our south, isn't it? So yeah, sure, they can just run across and you know, bomb the fuck out of it, sure. But what is going to be more dangerous is because these guys in the north are going to engage this way, our guys in the north are going to back up east, and they're going to clump more with east guys. So these guys in the north are probably not going to do much damage. But these guys in the south can potentially do a lot of damage if they actually send enough people through the south. So what you can do here is, if you're a disengaged tank, what I would do is, if I had better understanding of my Zerg, I would probably be able to choose better. But from what I see here, just in the screen, I would probably choose to defend this bottom part instead, which is actually, I think, what he did. He went through the south. Let's pull it back a little bit. Oh, he's so far forward. Oh my God. Okay, so he's just playing really forward tank, I guess. Yeah, so look, so somebody went and knocked this back, right? Somebody went and knocked this back at the bottom, and look, the top isn't gonna do anything. Oh yeah, that is a wall. That is a wall, right? So in fact, in this situation, okay, so now that I understand that that is a wall, I didn't know, so it changes everything, right? Because that's a wall, I don't give a damn about the south, because my guys have to walk out north, right? So therefore, this now becomes the most critical component. This top section needs to be stopped. Okay, so these guys that are slowing and stopping the bottom, they're actually wasting their skills. I think they should be using their shit up top, right? This is how reading your enemy, but also reading your situation, is going to tell you what to do, right? You can predict their engage, but you can also see what is going to be the best outcome for you to do, right? So here they engage and they walk back east across. They get down the hill. Great. Now that they're down the hill, now you know the enemy's up the hill and they don't have cooldowns because they tried to use cooldowns. Now, do they not have cooldowns? They do have cooldowns. They didn't actually get to use all their E's. Most of the people still have E's, but they don't have sprints. And that's a big deal, because if they don't have sprints, that means that if you engage on them, they can't necessarily kite you very well, right? Now, let's see here if they do anything here. They're going to wrap around. Okay, here's okay. They actually got flanked with allies. Their allies are north here, and they're getting flanked and they're getting pressed here. And so our guys are engaging here. Now, if you're this disengaged tank, the enemy disengaged tank, there's only one direction in which the enemy is going to engage you from, right? The enemy being our guys, right? So he's going to go and stop this here, probably. He's going to jump. Yep, there it is. Now, he was late, but whatever. He did his job, right? And now there's only one direction for the enemy to pull back. It's going to be northwest. Why? Because the terrain says so, because northwest is clear, right? But also because the enemy, your allies and your Zerg are down here. So there's only one direction the enemy is going to go to. This is why this guy's going so deep, because he can, and because he knows that he can catch the enemy off guard, right? Again, I'm just going to keep letting the video run. But essentially, that's what reading the enemy is going to do for you, okay? Now, let's go into the highest level reading the enemy stuff, okay? And this is, I'll tell you guys the truth. This is the stuff that the majority of people are not able to apply. I'm not saying that they're not able to they don't know these things. I'm sure they do. I'm sure that the highest level players know all these things. But it's very different to know these things and actually apply them, just like we were looking at right now with this video, right? And to apply them, right, it's going to be the hardest thing to do. And these are it, right? This is the master section, right? So with the master, we have the missing in action, right? If the enemy has a higher debuff than what you actually see in front of you, right? Now, why is this hard to actually do? Because if you're in a back and forth fight, it's very hard to look at the enemy's debuff and to actually remember their debuff from the beginning of the fight and look at what's actually in front of you to understand what is happening, right? That is very, very hard. If it's before the fight starts and you're like, yeah, they have 40%, but they have a T3 blob, that doesn't make any fucking sense. Obviously, you understand that, right? But during the middle of a fight, if the enemy is engaging you and you're engaging the enemy back and everything's a back and forth, and you look around and you're like, hey, these guys had 38% debuff, and all I see in front of me is like 40 dudes. There's no way this is all that they have. That means that they probably are flanking you somewhere. So you should mount up, look around, try to find where they're flanking you from. And again, the terrain will probably tell you exactly where they're flanking from. All right. Another one is when the enemy makes an unreasonable change in tactic. Okay. What I mean by that is that, okay, if you engage the enemy a lot and you kill a lot of their guys and they're playing really aggressive and then you kill a lot of their guys, they're suddenly playing more defensive. That makes sense, right? I mean, you kind of hit them hard a few times, right? That makes sense. But if they actually just like, you guys are going back and forth, you're engaging on each other, and there's not a lot of kills on either side, and they suddenly just change their tactics, right? They suddenly just play really defensive. Or the opposite, they're playing really defensive and suddenly they start fucking pushing, like seemingly stupidly, right? Like you're holding a choke and it's like obvious they can't break through that choke. But suddenly, like, and they're slow, they're just playing defensive on their side of the choke, and suddenly they're like full pushing through your fucking choke, right? That's probably because you're getting flanked from behind. You just don't know it yet, right? That kind of stuff matters. If they have an unreasonable change in tactic, then you have to look around. Are they flanking me, right? Are they doing, are they changing up the tactic in some shape or form that it's actually going to hurt me right now? Where should I be looking, right? People don't just randomly change in tactic is my point. All right. Now, with that being said, a change in tactic could also be delaying, right? What if they suddenly like you put yourself in front of them and they're not taking the bait, right? Like you're basically giving them free kills if they engage, but they're not engaging. Like, that's weird, isn't it? Like, it's like you put your Zerg in front of them and they're not engaging. Why? Well, what if they're actually delaying for something? What if they have a bomb squad going around behind you and they're waiting for that bomb squad to be in position, or a whole Zerg behind you? What if they actually have allies, 2 zones away, right? And they're just delaying until those allies get to the zone before they actually full-blown engage you, right? And so you might be like, well, that's weird. They're just playing really passive. Well, maybe they're not playing passive. Maybe they're just delaying, right? And that'll tell you something else, right? It'll tell you that you might actually have, a worse situation if you wait, right? So it might be better to just play aggressive now than to let them wait for whatever they're waiting for. Okay. Now another one with the master, it's gonna be the casualties. Okay. Did the enemy take too many casualties of a particular type? Now, everybody, in the basics, I guess you can say, everybody understands that, yes, if the enemy lost a lot of players, then they're going to be weaker and they're going to be, easier to kill, right? And I understand that. I get that. That's fine. But this is the difference between the basic and the master, right? It's going to be, did they take too many casualties of a particular type? Did they lose too many tanks? Did they lose too many other healers? Did they lose too many other DPS, right? What does that look like? Because you can actually look and see, and I can tell you guys every single time when an enemy loses too many of their front line, right? Suddenly, you can just dive into their back line and demolish them in one engage, right? And they may not realize that they've lost too many tanks, right? They might think that they're okay. And so understanding the difference in which players have actually died, rather than just, oh yeah, we've lost 20 players out of our 90. Okay, that's fine. But if out of those 20 players, 15 of them were fucking healers or DPS, right? Then suddenly you have a really big problem, right? And you can see it too when in fights, like sometimes the healers go and die, like a lot of the healers die. And then what happens is that suddenly the enemy Zerg can't keep up their heals. And so what you should do is you just engage them, and every 30 seconds you engage them again, engage them again, engage them again. Don't let them breathe, because that way you're gonna make sure that they run out of heals. They literally can't keep up with heals, right? But if you go and play slow when they have low healers, then you're basically playing to their benefit, right? This is a high level understanding of the game, okay? And again, one thing is for me to say it here, sitting here, relaxing, just talking to you guys. And another thing is to actually apply this mentality during the fight and to understand how to apply that, right? Most of the callers, I'll tell you guys again, and I say it over and over, most of the callers in the game, even the best callers in the game right now, they don't hit these notes. They just don't, okay? They really don't. Like, because it's so hard to actually be aware of these things the entire time, okay? And the last one for the master, the last way to read the enemy is gonna be basically when you're denying everything, okay? You're basically beating the enemy so hard, but I don't mean like you're killing them. I mean like everything they're trying to do just doesn't work, right? They try to engage you, it doesn't work. They try to kite you, it doesn't work. They try to whatever. They're trying different things and it doesn't work. You can be sure what's gonna happen. You can be sure that they're gonna continue switching tactics, okay? Now, if they're a low tier Zerg, they're not gonna do that, right? A low tier Zerg is just gonna keep banging their head against a brick wall, and it's not gonna happen. But a higher tier Zerg will acknowledge, a higher tier caller, I should say, will acknowledge that their efforts are not working the way they want it to. They're gonna switch tactics, right? And so you need to be able to understand that that tactic switch might be something from like playing a kite to instead playing full pressure, right? Like crescent pressure or you know, bait and switch or you know, the different kind of calling styles, right? Or it might simply be simple as like playing defensive to playing aggressive, right? Those kinds of things are gonna be different tactics that they're definitely going to employ, and you need to be ready for their change. And to understand what they're gonna possibly change to, you're gonna have to look at the rest of the things that we've looked at, down from the basics, the apprentice, the veteran, and the master, to be able to understand what is probably their best course of action, and that way you can counter it effectively. All right. Now, I know that in this episode, I didn't necessarily tell you guys too much about what to do if you see something, right? Like if you see this, do this. If you see that, do that. And the reason I can't do that is because you have to assess every situation, right? Just because the enemy is walking into you does not mean they're getting ready to engage you. Not every time, right? You have to look at other things as well, right? Things like, are their health bars up or are they down? Is the pace of the fight high or like fast or slow? Is the enemy missing players because they have higher debuff, right? Is the terrain allowing them for engages and things like that, right? You have to be able to piece all of those things together. So I cannot tell you guys, if you see this, then that's happening. If you see this, then that's happening. I gave you guys a little bit of my input of what I think. You know, if I see this happening, then I think this probably happened. Just to kind of give you guys a sense of what I'm thinking, right? But at the end of the day, you guys have to look at these things, and then you have to understand what might come from it based on the situation, right? Just because the enemy's playing aggressive doesn't mean you should change your tactics. You need to understand what your Zerg is doing, what the enemy Zerg is doing, and then be able to employ those things, okay? This is why I said, and I said over and over and over, right? Even the highest, best callers in the game have difficulties being able to master reading the enemy, because it's so hard. And not only is it so hard, it's also something that you have to reassess repeatedly, right? You have to continually reassess it. Just because things were one way 5 seconds ago doesn't mean they're still the same now, right? It's very, very different. Now, putting it together, right? Putting all of these little pieces together, you have to realize that they are puzzle pieces, okay? Every single one of these things that I just mentioned, whether it's something from the basics or the veteran, it doesn't matter. They're all pieces to the puzzle, okay? You're never gonna get all of this information. You're never gonna get it, okay? You're gonna get all of this information throughout a very long fight at different points in time, but you're never gonna get all this information at the same exact time. And the reason is simple. You can't see everything at the same exact time, right? If you're looking at the enemy's footwork, you're not looking at how many enemies they have. And you're not looking if they're missing their bomb squad, and you're not looking, right? So you can only do so much, is what I'm saying. And so the enemy's gonna show all of these things, but you can only process a certain number of them at the same time. So you have to put it together. And then when you put it together, you have to narrow it down, right? Narrow it down. What are the most likely courses of action for the enemy? And which ones are just simply not going to happen, right? Like based on the information I see, the enemy is very unlikely to engage me, right? Like if I see the enemy's health bars are low and the enemy has no cooldowns and the enemy's kiting back, right? And the enemy has taken a lot of casualties on their DPS front, okay? All those things put together tell me it is very unlikely that the enemy is going to engage me. So I'm not going to think about that. Instead, I'm going to think about the likely outcome, which is they're probably going to keep backing off, right? Maybe even they're going to run away, right? Those are two outcomes, right? They run away or they keep backing off and they keep kiting, right? And which one do I think it's going to do? Well, we'll see, right? Well, you got to take your pick, right? I think they're going to run away. Okay, so I'm going to sprint to the back line and try to catch them so that they don't mount up. Okay, well, that's one option. But what if you do that and they don't do that, and then you get caught behind the enemy line and then you get killed, right? So you got to weigh these things. You got to understand it. You got to narrow it down. But at the end of the day, you got to make a choice. And that's my point, is that you got to make a choice. If you're not 100% sure, just make a choice. That way you can at least cover that scenario, right? And usually what I tell guys is that if you're one of the people that is very, very, very good at reading the enemy, like you're one of the best players in your Zerg to read the enemy, then the best thing I can say to you guys is try to focus on protecting against the worst possible outcome, right? Just because the worst possible outcome is not the highest potential to happen doesn't mean you should follow the crowd, right? Think about this. If the enemy engages you right now, you guys are wiped. Versus if the enemy backs off, you guys live. Okay, you should prepare to defend against an engage, even if the enemy engaging you right now is unlikely. Why? Because that would have a terrible, terrible outcome. And guess what? Most people, most players, again, they don't even hit the apprentice level, okay? Most players just hit the basics and that's it. So if you're a really high level player who understands how to read the enemy, right? Then what you want to do is you want to focus on the higher level things to understand, because everybody else is going to be like, yeah, the enemy's still kiting, so I'm just going to, keep pushing them, right? The rest of your Zerg is going to cover that scenario. So what you should cover is the other scenario, the one that are more likely scenarios, the ones that are easier to understand, the ones that are easier to see, right? So that's it for today. We're all done. We had a lot today. But we got through it, hour and a half. I know I'm trying to make the videos a little shorter. But yeah, there was a lot to go through today. Hour and a half, not terrible though. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat right now. I'll give you guys about a minute because I know that the chat is usually delayed. But yeah, that's it for episode 29, reading the enemy. Let me see here. Oh, the video's still playing. No, there it is. All right, no questions. All right, I appreciate you guys. We have the next episode is gonna be episode 30. That's gonna be 1 week from today. We're keeping the same schedule. Let me see what's the video. I forgot what's the next episode. Oh, it's Kite. Yeah, so we're going back to our we're gonna go back to our series that we're doing on calling styles, right? So the kiting style is gonna come next week. That's actually a a really important style, but it's a really hard style to learn and to do effectively. It's really tough, right? But in my opinion, it's the best style in this game, hands down, right? If you can do it properly. So anyway, we'll talk about that next week on Friday at 00 UTC. Thank you guys for everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Should I keep your number on my phone? Should I keep it or let go? Keep your number on my phone. Why should I keep your number on my phone? Should I keep it or let go? Keep your number on my phone.